You're listening to the Keys to Success podcast. I'm Caroline Johnston, founder and CEO of Caroline Sarah Ventures, a consulting and coaching company focused on developing international businesses and interpersonal relationships. Here at Caroline Sarah Ventures, we believe storytelling is one of the best ways to learn from leaders in our communities. On this podcast, you'll hear from experts across the business world, including myself. As a multilingualist and international business leader with over 15 years experience developing sales and marketing strategies for success, I know how important engaging with people and communicating across cultural lines is. Here we'll show you the importance of leadership coaching, how to grow small to medium-sized enterprises, and how to develop team and community building within your own organizations. As we learn together from industry experts, please feel free to reach out to us at Caroline Sarah Ventures for coaching or consultant services at info@carolinesarahventures.com. For now, let's give a listen to what our guest today has to say about their keys to success. Hi, everyone. Today I will be speaking with Dr. John Young, founder and chairman of McLaughlin Young Group. John is also Ireland's first honorary consul for the state of North Carolina. He's a recognized leader in the area of human capital consulting and has been working in the US for over 30 years. He's also written a great book called Being Intentional, Making Work and Play One and the Same. John and I met a few years ago in North Carolina, and I am so happy to have him here with us today. Welcome, John.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
So could you tell us a little bit about your background and what inspired you to take this career path?
Yeah, I was born in the Glens of Antrim and started my early days there, started school there, but mainly went to school in London. That's why I sound more English than like you. Then, after my first degree, I got introduced to a professor at Purdue University in Indiana, and I went over there and did my doctorate, postdoc in psychology of aging, Washington University in St. Louis. I thought I was destined for an academic career, but a couple of brothers in a small town in Indiana that I consulted with asked me if I would go there and create a healthy company in a healthy town. You know, our lives are sort of determined by the doors we open, the doors we close, and that was a real pivotal one for me. As I worked in that community and with that company, I started to see a broader application than just individual health. And that really was pivotal in how I created McLaughlin Young. And as I thought about organizational health, I realized I could transpose that way of thinking about personal health to organizational health. So I listened for what the genetics are in a corporation or a business or a community. We could even say in a country. I listen for lifestyle, which I listen for the culture that is the environment. Probably the most important discipline we invoke in organizational health is as a cultural anthropologist. So relocated to Charlotte, where I came to found an institute as part of now the biggest healthcare system, and definitely in the Carolinas, if not in the country. And after 4 years of that, I started my own company, McLaughlin Young. And we've been in business over 33 years. And now my daughter runs the business, and I get to meet with people like yourself, Caroline.
Well, it was an honor to meet with you in Charlotte, North Carolina, a few years ago at the British American Business Council. And especially as you're from Northern Ireland, McLaughlin Young is known for human capital expertise. And I wanted to ask you, what programs have you set up as a leader? And maybe you could speak into the employee assistance program.
Yeah, one of the unique things about McLaughlin Young is that, and it's never changed since I founded it, we handle the whole bandwidth of human capital. So I believe that we can't really be of service to a corporation or an organization or its leadership or the employees if we don't have the whole bandwidth. So I'm mainly working with leadership teams and CEOs, but at the other end of our bandwidth, we've 40,000 counselors that support our program nationwide for employee assistance. That's where we respond to personal problems of employees at any hour of the day, 24/7. And incidentally, when we analyze what we deal with, we almost see back into the soul of a company. And to your question about the human capital, when leaders fail these days, it usually isn't the business plan or the marketing plan. Those are brilliant. It's people issues, human stuff that they tend to underestimate or think that maybe somebody else in the company is taking care of that stuff. It's almost like it's the future because you can't tell people how to feel. So the human capital, as I said, we tend to be very customized. We have programs that make sense. But the truth is, when an organization comes to us, they're usually in some pain. And I started to realize that that pain often fits into a 6-circle model that I kind of use. And that would be the first triaging. And if you imagine these 6 circles, and at 11 o'clock, we've got customer satisfaction sales growth. That's every organization has that aspiration. You better have quality products and services. And of course, we've created a whole industry around words like quality, safety, leadership. But you can't sustain that quality if you don't unleash the creativity and embrace the diversity of the workplace. And you won't see that coming around if you don't have an openness to change. And you won't see that if you don't have a sense of safeness in the organization. And ultimately, the trusted and effective leadership is the driver. I'm a frustrated aviator. In fact, I've flown 8 million miles around the world doing this work. So I tend to think in aviation metaphors. So that would be sort of the engine or the power. And if you think about aviation, what you need power to get the vehicle moving. Then you need lift, and then you need the direction. So I've developed these 3 models that help us with that. And I just described the one that gives the power to the organization. When you've got an organization that's beautifully, exquisitely led, and people are feeling safe, and then are open to change instead of being pathologized as resistant to change, and then you're embracing the diversity and unleashing that creativity, that's going to be awesome. That is the organizational health. The trouble is with this area of human capital is that we get marginalized. You get people saying, well, how does what you do affect the bottom line? I got so frustrated with that, I refused to be marginalized because I've read the book, I know how things end. But I developed a thing called the paradigm for profitability. So instead of thinking of profitability as the bottom line, I made it the top line. And then using that prospective medicine, deductive kind of precursors to risk factors and precursors, I asked the question, well, what's the immediate precursor to profitability? So I would say it's productivity, but you'd be highly productive and not profitable. And of course, that's where we want teamwork, and we do a lot of teamwork around productivity. To be sure, you need to be effective. So that would be the next level. We do a lot of training for effectiveness. And it's so easy to default and just put the training dollars at those 3 levels instead of what's below that. And the immediate level below that is relationships. Of course, the precursor to a good, healthy relationship in any context is communication. Then the precondition to that is listening. And then the precondition to that is respect. And ultimately, knowing. So if you take any relationship that goes to hell, you hear people say, we didn't communicate, he didn't listen to me, he didn't respect me. When somebody says you don't even know me, that's trouble. That is trust. So we pride ourselves in being able to help organizations and leaders develop that trust that when combined with the effectiveness, then that's awesome for creating that very first circle that drives a powerful organization. That's the model that I use to think of giving lift to an organization. So obviously the knowing part is putting the oxygen mask on yourself first, but then knowing other people and truly understanding respect and listening and communication.
Thanks for taking us through those steps, John. You've taught in universities, including UNC, and consulted in leadership in various companies on the 3rd circle concept. I find it very useful for coaching and consulting, particularly for personal growth, as the client can look at their current state in circle 1 and move to circle 2 to identify self-limiting beliefs and barriers so they can achieve an ideal state in the 3rd circle. It's really important to have this vision and aspire to reach this state and to develop self-awareness. So what would you recommend to our listeners going through these challenging times?
What really good leaders do, besides owning the paradigm for profitability and being able to understand what they're really dealing with, They have a way of finding their voice to describe that third circle. And of course, it involves vision, but you only have seconds, as we know, to create trust with people. So can you, without any props, tell me what that third circle is? Where you intend to take the enterprise? How do you demonstrate that you have the trustworthiness that would make people feel safe following you? Only when you can describe that do you come back to the second half of that second circle and figure out causally what it will take to get there. You can't leap a 20-foot chasm in 2 10-foot jumps. So what do I have to leverage? And what are the saboteurs I have to confront? Good leaders are honest about where they stand and the situation they've inherited. They can see in their mind's eye that third circle. And of course, it often hasn't existed before, so it's strange. And that's why 2 other things that we totally underestimate in leadership are selling your third circle, and understanding that you're on stage, being in every move you make is being evaluated relative to, shall I trust this person or shall I follow? What I've noticed is, while I intended that third circle to be for leaders, I noticed people's faces would change when they understand the concept, and they were sort of evaluating the rest of their lives against that. So being intentional is taking that third circle and applying it first to career, then to marriage, then raising emotionally healthy children, then being a trusted and effective leader, and then asking the question, am I part of my customer's third circle, where it would be unconscionable for them to do business with anybody else? And then am I part of my community's third circle? And if you think about it, that's the sequence in which those third circles happen in our lives, going from the most self-centered, the career, to the most altruistic, the community.
It's great that you shared this with me, because I remember some of these points in your book, and I would really encourage listeners to check out John's book, Being Intentional, and Making Work and Play One and the Same. It's a fantastic book. I got so much out of it. I wrote so many notes, and I really want to go back to it. It's phenomenal and very rich, and a lot of wisdom in there for leaders. And one quote on leadership that I really like is, as a leader, you must understand the soul of your business, have a clear vision for the future of the enterprise, and be able to passionately describe how you plan to take the organization to that ideal place.
And what we've not, as a company, tapped into fully yet is this whole aspect of being part of your customer's third circle, because I think that changes the whole way we think about sales. I thought that I had been so well prepared academically that all I had to do was turn up and talk. What I noticed was that people didn't care at all about my academic credentials. What they care about is, can you solve my problem? Having had the contrast of the academic preparation, but also then working with organizations all over the world, and then having built my own business, and now my daughter and my son, Moira and Sean, they run the business and are taking it to another level entirely. But don't underestimate community. You and I care very much about Northern Ireland and how passionate we are for that. But equally, it applies to countries about third circles. Most people don't have a third circle. And once you get the concept, it's striking how quickly you can see who doesn't have a third circle. And God forbid that we're being asked to follow a leader who doesn't have a third circle.
Yeah. It's been extremely useful, like applying your tools to also my own career. I've thought about these things and raising other people's morale, like employee morale. Maybe you could speak into some examples of how the companies you've worked with and changes you've seen in those companies through difficult situations, how this has been useful.
It's very hard to solve things if you don't talk the same language. So part of the models, they can quickly help you not only understand where you stand in time and space, how quickly can you figure out where you are? Because you're having to, as a leader, operate on the fly. You almost have to be able to make an intuitive assessment of situation and then go from there. When I'm coaching the executive, I like to think of it as a stool with 3 legs. One leg is really helping the leader understand the organizational context that they're operating within, and knowing their field, knowing the dynamics, all of that kind of stuff. Then there's another piece that I rely on colleagues who are actors. and professionally, to help the leader understand that being on stage aspect. And then it's getting into where did we come from? What was the origin, our origins? And what were the paradigms we were raised with about leadership? In the first book, 5 Essential Leadership Questions, there's a chapter there called, Do You Feel Entitled to be a Trusted and Effective Leader? Because true leaders, they can see it so clearly where they want the enterprise to go, but they are able to adapt. When you think about crises or people's crises, there's 2 things that we have to watch out for. And any good clinician monitors this. One is the degree of isolation and the loss of hope. We see this now with political leaders who are disconnected. We see it with leaders in corporations, where more and more the workforce feels isolated from the leadership. And then the lack of hope. So it's sort of, again, the metaphor for an accident waiting to happen. The huge potential, one of the dangers is to, as I said earlier, to say, I'm this, therefore your problem's this. In clinical setting, you don't judge, you listen, you take the client from where they are. And it's the same in organizational health.
Thanks for sharing that, John. And it definitely believe that listening is a key part. Firstly, when you were mentioning selling, Caroline Sarah Ventures does a lot of business development consulting work. And through my career, I've worked in sales and marketing and in selling. Before I thought, oh yeah, I need to talk and promote this product. But it's very much about listening, as you say, to what the customer's problem is or what the client's problem is. And then also through coaching, I've learned to let the coachee speak for 80% of the time, and then they can reach that place of self-awareness. And it's good for problem solving in any circumstance.
There's a classic saying in the sales training field that when you're telling, you're not selling.
Yes, I love that.
In the book, I talk about Spencer Tracy coaching Burt Reynolds and saying less is more.
Yes. So, John, we're very passionate about Ireland, Northern Ireland, and maybe you could let us know about the work you're doing as Honorary Consul in North Carolina for Ireland and maybe share a highlight.
The Honorary Consul's role is one that you never know what's going to happen. Our primary role is to provide consular assistance. So if somebody gets stranded, lose their passport, for example, I can issue travel documents to get the person home. But very early on in my tenure, I was appointed in 2014. Just a couple of months later, there was the Jason Corbett murder, and that was in just a town just northeast of Charlotte, Lexington. So I was on the ground full time for a week with the family, and that was a very tricky, still is, case. So you never know what crisis is going to happen. Ireland, as you know, tended to be present in the US in particular, in places like Boston and New York, San Francisco. But with the crash of 2008, they started to realize that there were parts of the states that really hadn't got representation. And one is the Southeast. So one of the appointments they made was a consul general in Atlanta. And then he appointed an honorary consul in Orlando and then appointed me in Charlotte. I also noted when I was appointed that, to me, North Carolina so resembles Ireland in the sense that the natural beauty of both places, the commitment to education, and then also the kind of clean kind of corporate footprint they want, fintech, pharmaceuticals. I also work in ways I can to support the businesses, plus the cultural and stimulating the education. The number of people who contact me just dying to go live in Ireland, it's amazing. You know, they may have gone on vacation and just experienced the naturalness of it and wholesomeness.
What do you miss most about Ireland?
I've convinced some people that I literally have a dog in Galway because I tell people I have to get back and let the dog out. I miss the family. I've got a lot of cousins in Antrim that I always go back to visit there. We developed a lot of friendships around Galway. I just love the pace of life. I just love to get lost in Ireland.
Yeah, I love going back to, and as you know, I'm from Antrim, County Antrim, and I really appreciate the scenery and definitely see the connection. And I actually call Charlotte my US home.
Right.
I definitely agree with you on that. And so for Northern Ireland and just the islands of Ireland, what do you think would be useful, or what do you think they're really missing in organizations, or something that we could bring?
I think the more the whole island gets to know itself and one another, so again, working with the paradigm, the incredible beauty of the Antrim coast, the Glens of Antrim. So many people, too often too, they do a direct beeline from Dublin to the Giant's Causeway and miss the real beauty around the coast. And the town that I lived in was Cushendall, which is, again, very famous for GAA. What I often think about is the absence of that third circle. What is the potential? Wonderful education, very strong people, very passionate. And I think if that were harnessed to a real proactive third circle, and what that is, it's so hard because it has to be imagined. And then when it's truly imagined and believed in, then the passion about protecting that. If you remember in the book Being Intentional, the first example I gave actually of a third circle was London envisioning the Olympics, and how when Mitt Romney kind of questioned whether they were ready for it, they bristled and pushed back on him, because that did kind of provide a sense of purpose. But there's third circles all around us that need to happen. People trying to be heard, understood, listened to, respected. Again, too many leaders just absolutely destroy the paradigm for profitability in the lower part. And while we say that's trust, it's also intimacy.
Yeah, and I think often a lot of people won't be heard, or their opinions won't be listened to. And I believe also, in having grown up in Northern Ireland and seeing the societal issues and conflict, that has been a really key part of the peace process, and having these dialogues and inter-community activities and really building up that trust and realizing, okay, we're human beings after all. We may have a different belief system or a different way of doing things or a different color of skin or whatever that may be in any country. And I think the essential thing is to go back to humanity and care for one another and build each other up. And I think that's really important and something that has helped in Northern Ireland too. And then moving forward, I feel that there's so many resilient people there, and they've learned to be tough and fight through things. And what would you say about that, John?
I think when I was talking earlier about we have to get a common language. How do we, in any place, get us talking the same language, getting us visualizing the possibilities? And I'm a member of the American Psychological Association. I'm absolutely struck how positive psychology hasn't made it into one of the 65 divisions. And even in the academic world, to sometimes think of the negative instead of the positive.
I love positive psychology and applying it into coaching. I've seen the positive results and feedback that I get from those. And going back to Northern Ireland, or a lot of women leaders that I'm working with, and they don't have hope. And talking about your third circle, like, what is their aspirations, and do they really believe in this vision that they can accomplish those goals or achieve this vision? But with positive psychology and bringing like positive affirmations into things, they can really start to believe in themselves.
The other thing is that learned helplessness. And that was a sociological term that was coined in the 80s. Is there a little bit of that in Northern Ireland, that we come to take it?
Those things that are learned can be unlearned, right?
Yeah. I actually believe that most of my philosophy of life and the work I do, sure, I've got the academic stuff, but it really goes back to Northern Ireland, because I'm a keen observer of things. And when I would be going back in the summers working with my uncle on the farm all summer long, and this was pre-electrification. So you had to learn to sing, dance, tell stories, because we had to entertain ourselves. But also that sense of community and building community to Northern Ireland. Hopefully we can break that cycle of negative talk, thinking about third circle, something that forces us to commit to as a community, and then don't allow the saboteurs to derail us. But you can't leap a 20-foot chasm in 2 10-foot jumps. So how do we not only see it, but then what would be a systematic approach to bringing that about? And then what do we have to leverage?
Thank you, John, for sharing. Just to close, what is one thing or a key to success as a coach and consultant?
People have to feel safe with you. If they don't feel safe and can trust you, they're not going to come to you or allow themselves to be vulnerable. Leadership is about two things, character and imagination, but it's a very lonely place. How do you deal with that loneliness if you're a leader? It could be by having a mentor, having a coach, colleagues that you process things through. It's amazing how sometimes we don't see a particular option. Don't be isolated. And the imagination, and I was stressing that throughout, that's what gives people hope, whether it's imagining the workplace or imagining the marriage or imagining the community. And that third circle is integrity, proportionality, and beauty. It's not so grandiose that it's untenable. That's the proportionality. And it has integrity. You just see it. But then it's such a beautiful thing, and people are attracted to beauty.
John, thank you so much for sharing such profound things and your wisdom and your work. We're just so pleased to have you with us today. And I look forward to
Cup of tea in Charlotte.
A cup of tea and some soda bread. I'll bring some samples, actually. I've been working on some new recipes. So
I'm at crisis level because normally when I go to Ireland, I break down packets of Barry's tea and put them in a big garbage bag and take it back here. And now it's not being able to get over there.
You've run out?
I'm running out of my tea.
Well, I hope you find some. We will end it right there. And we look forward also to doing work in Northern Ireland and Ireland in the near future.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to the Keys to Success podcast with me, your host, Caroline Johnston. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us and make sure to stay updated on all we're doing on our website or social media. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Caroline Sarah Ventures and on Twitter at Caroline Sarah V. We hope you've enjoyed this episode and that you'll join us next time as we take a look at our next guest, Keys to Success. Take care.